Right. Ta-da. Welcome to this I'm Teg Prakash, if you don't already know. This is Looking Up, and this day, today, we're working with the Gemini full moon, and this is, all full moons are important, all full moons are relevant. The importance of this one, I think, is amplified in that it is the last full moon before the winter solstice. So every year, the last full moon before winter solstice is this Gemini full moon. And it'll vary when it happens in the month, but it's always the last one before winter solstice, because the next full moon is always in Cancer. Anyway, it's predictable. The world is predictable. The skies are predictable if we just pay attention a little bit. And that's what astrology is. It's just paying attention to patterns. So the full moon is always a time of release, is always a time of allowing things to fall away. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The full moon is like at the beginning of the month, we get the new moon, or the beginning of the lunation, we get the new moon, and the moon grows in its reflective light, or in the light that it reflects to us anyhow. And that increases until the full moon, obviously full, it's that for a reason, and then it wanes, it goes away. So that energy, that idea of increasing energy and decreasing energy is not all that is created in the first half of the month is destroyed now in the second. No, it's like the energy grows, and in the first part, it's very private, very personal, very secluded in its own little shell. It's like a seed that's given life, and it's germinating, but it's still very much in the ground. And then the seed breaks the ground and reaches up into the world and starts to interact with other forces. And that's where we get the second quarter. Then the seed grows into a full-fledged plant, and then we have the full moon, where it's reached its peak of growth, and it must now seed. It must now, shed something. It must now release something. And so we, the plant forces, well, in a lot of instances, obviously not in trees and other things, but this is basically the same process in different varying intensities. The plant forces nutrients that it has stored up through the growing season into the very ends of its being to create flowers and or seeds or otherwise things that would propagate that plant's existence into the future. So that's the full moon point, when it's reached its peak and it's now going to move energy out of itself. So it's very, it's very visible, it's very exposed, it's very interactive, and it's now going to continue to interact with the outer world. But it starts to release some of the energy. It starts to remove some of the energy from its life force. And so each idea that we plant, any seed that we plant at the new moon, it then grows in that fashion and it propagates into the future. It's not losing energy at the end, it's creating more seeds. So each thing, we're in the process of creating more seeds now. But it's some of the seeds will stay, and some of the seeds will succeed, and some of the seeds will get carried off into the distance. Some of the seeds will be harvested by relatively smart bipeds that wander around. maybe. And some of the seeds will not do anything at all. Some of the seeds will absolutely fail. They will not propagate. But that's the point. Some of the things must shed and no longer propagate. So the full moon is that. The full moon is that space where we are allowing for the plant or the idea or the project or the thought process or the dedicated self-improvement journey to reach its interaction with the rest of the world. And that's the full moon. And then the rest of the cycle is the idea kind of falling away from your own personal self and becoming something of the world. So the creation, poetry is a good one for this. The poet writes the poetry, and the poetry is meaningful to them. Obviously, it's channeled through them for a reason. It has some sort of meaning, some sort of purpose, but to spend the rest of the poet's life trying to explain to people what it means to him is fruitless. It's absolutely fucking pointless. It's pointless. And so the poet releases the poem. It's no longer his. It doesn't matter what he thought it meant. He being used broadly to whatever. It's no longer the property. It was never the property of the poet. It was always meant to move out into the world and interact with the world, and different people see it in different ways, and that's where this Gemini full moon comes in, is the perspectives of things. Different people see different things. They have different meaning that they hold in this poem or this book or this television show or this conversation. The different meanings are pulled out of it. That's human existence in a nutshell. So we have the full moon, and the full moon is where it's kind of released into the world. It interacts with the world, it continues to be in the world, and then it can fall away. And whoever is creating can start to create something else, can allow for the necessary things to fall away and create something new in the future. So that's where we're at. We allow for things to fall away to create new things in the future. So Gemini full moon, specifically the Gemini full moon, is potent in its way of shedding our unnecessary perspectives, our modes of thought, the hang-ups in our brains that keep us from benefiting into the future. So we can dig, we can allow a little looseness of the soil, we'll say, so that things can come to the surface and they can be gotten rid of as needed. So we have the Gemini full moon and its own potency of allowing for us to change different perspectives, and it's interacting with a couple of things. So we have these 4 mutable signs. We have Pisces. I was about to sneeze. We have Pisces and Gemini and Virgo and Sagittarius. We have these 4 signs are the mutable signs. They're the signs where change happens. It's where mastery of the element has already been met, and now it is mutable. It can now change into whatever is next needed. So the mutable signs are signs of change. They're signs of transformation. We get the full moon, and it's also a place of transformation. We're changing to a new mode of being by releasing certain things. And we have the sun and the moon in Sagittarius and Gemini, respectively. That's the full moon. And then we have Saturn over in Pisces, at the first few degrees of Pisces. It's interacting with this full moon energy. And we also have, this is a less important thing, it's also it's less potent. It's not less important. It's less powerful as an entity, as a being in the cosmos. But it's relevant because, well, it's tangled up in all of this, so it's affecting everything. Lilith in Virgo, currently in Virgo, actually very close to an exact aspect. And when we get all 4 of these, we have this cardinal cross. We have Saturn opposing Lilith, and we have Sun opposing Moon, and they're all what's called squaring each other. These are all challenging aspects. So there's this opening. There's this opening. It's like it's absolutely inevitable. It's required, but it's also inevitable that things change within this. It's like the ability of Saturn in Pisces is, maybe it slows the process down a little, but it allows for an absolute potential for dissolution. You can dissolve anything into the realm that is Pisces. Literally just disappears. It's magic. It's the last phase of the zodiac, and it's where you did the whole traversal thing around the deal, and then you hit Pisces, and you're like, all right, cool, great journey, one with God, and then incarnate once again in Aries. It doesn't specifically happen like that, at least in the linear fashion that you're thinking at this very moment, but that's the point. That's the point. The Pisces energy is where things go to dissolve, to become unified, or to disperse as needed. And then we get Lilith in Virgo, which is a bit interesting. Lilith is tied to the primal feminine. By primal, I don't mean like the monkey feminine. I mean the primal feminine, the primary, the first feminine, the initial feminine before there was a polarity, ultimately, or before there was a matching polarity, we'll say. We're not sure if there's ever been a polarity that matched Lilith, but that creative potential is very strong. And when we get that pure feminine sexual potency, the creative desire, the ability to go from one organism to two, that power that is held in the feminine sexuality is the energy of Lilith. And we get the desires that come with that, and the strength that comes with that in Virgo, the sign of purity. The sign of purity in the sense that practice creates a pure vessel. So you practice hammering a nail every single day, 100 times a day. And by the end of it, there is no thought about it. The vessel becomes the action. It's a pure action. Whether it's hammering a nail, or preaching the gospel, or doing cartwheels in a circus. You could probably do cooler things if you did it every day, but cartwheels is the first thing that came to mind. Whatever it is, it's the practice, it's the dedication. So combining Saturn's restriction and the dissolution of Pisces, along with Lilith's, we'll say, delightfully unhinged power, and that creative potential in the sign of development, in a structured sign, there's good balance here. We have structure of Virgo holding the candle for Lilith, and then we have the structure of Saturn operating within Pisces, and those two are in this challenging element with the moon and the sun. And so this ability to shed becomes all the more powerful. We have all the necessary support. Granted, it's challenging, but it's balanced. It's all balanced. It's all very well interacting with one another. And the trouble with it is allowing for everything to shift at once, because everything will shift at once. Because if you shift one thing, all the things around it must also shift. It's like a Rubik's Cube. Like, you spin one side, the whole side has to go. You can't just move one cube, one section of the cube, whatever. You can't just move one piece. You have to spin the whole side. The whole thing must change so that the perspective can change, so that the operation can change, so that the next move becomes possible. And that's the Gemini full moon. It's in general, but now we get all of the pieces tied together. So there's additional, I would call it support, not because it's easy, but because it's forceful. forcing the process. You must change. You must allow yourself to change. You must allow yourself to shift, and allow things that don't support that process to go away. Whether it's people, which there's been a running theme of relations and relational dynamics this year. The whole, we get like the Venus retrograde was a very powerful thing. The eclipses were all ruled by Venus. Not all, but mostly, were they? No, not all of them were ruled by Venus, but several of them this year were ruled by Venus. And so there's a potency to the relational element of all of this. I forgot where I was going with that, but it's relevant. I lost track of where my head was spinning. So we get the full moon, and we get these things interacting with one another, and we get to shed whatever's not serving us, like relationships. We circled back. The relationships that we've formed that don't serve us, the ways that we behave within those relationships that don't serve us or the other person, because God knows we're not doing any good by like hurting them. It's just hurting us. Or we think we're hurting them and we're actually hurting us, or whatever it is. We think we're helping them, we're actually just hurting ourselves, and that doesn't help either of us. And so there's the relational element, or there's just the thought processes. The change of perspective it saves a lot of energy. Here's one example. I used to be very relaxed in traffic. I still am very relaxed in traffic, but I used to be like blissfully entertained by Los Angeles traffic. And this was in 2012, right? This was a different time. I've somehow become more serious about the world, and so things affect me in different ways. And somewhere along the way, I decided that I was going to be, when you're taking an on-ramp, you're taking the ramp onto the freeway, and there's room on the shoulder. If you want to be that person, you can just keep driving on the shoulder. I don't do that, but there's a part of me that gets really, really bothered when somebody else does it. I'm like, what the fuck are these assholes? They're just stopping traffic. They're the problem. Everybody's screwed because this guy just has to be somewhere. He drives a BMW every time. That's not true. Sometimes it's a Tesla or a Mercedes or whatever. Sometimes it's a Ford Bronco from the 80s, and the guy just wants to get places, and he's got a big car. But that all being said, the energy that it took me to be that mad at that person in that moment, and by that person, I mean this happened a bunch of times, but all of the times, the amount of energy that it took from me to do that was entirely pointless, entirely fruitless. It did me absolutely no good whatsoever. And it didn't do anything to the other person. They didn't give a shit. Like, they couldn't hear me. They couldn't feel my anger, my disruption. I wasn't like sending them blades of disdain. It's like nothing is affected except myself in that. And so at some point, I changed my perspective. I'm like, why am I mad at this person? Is it because I'm not going as fast as him? Is that exactly the reason why? Yes, that was precisely the reason. And I thought to myself, am I willing to be that asshole so I can go as fast as him and get out and get away from all of this traffic? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I know how it negatively contributes to the traffic situation as a whole. I know how it positively influences the potential for my tire to get popped on the frickin' shoulder of the road. And that was it. I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess he's just getting places faster than I am, and he's taking risks and affecting all of us, but I'm not affecting anything by being mad. I'm just like, fine, all right, good for that guy. He's getting places. I'm getting places at the speed which I have chosen, and I have no reason to be mad at that person, none whatsoever. I just get to be here in my lane with the choices that I've made and continue forward. That's it. Saves me so much energy. I see somebody go whizzing by, and I feel it's still back there. somewhere. It's like there's a little twitch, but the change of the neural pathway is the point. You change the neural pathway, and eventually it just becomes you, the pure action. It becomes a part of you. So anyway, that's my story about changing perspectives and saving energy and becoming a lot happier because of it. I'm so much less pissed off in traffic. And it's like the whole anger of traffic surprised me in the beginning, because like I didn't know where it came from. I was like, I used to be very chill. I used to be very okay with all of this traffic thing. I used to be entertained. I used to laugh at everyone as they like whizzed in between each other and wound around and took weird routes and cut people up. I just laughed and laughed and laughed, and then I became one of them. And it surprised me. So, you got to change your perspective sometimes. And it's not always easy or obvious. And sometimes it just happens. And you don't know where it came from. So allow for some of that. Gemini is it just happened. That's a good explanation of Gemini. I don't know where it came from. It just is. It just is now. So allow for some of that divine spark, some of that divine wisdom to just drop in and clear out whatever needs to clear out. That's what we got. That's what we got this time. And everything has to shift at the same time, but even if that feels like a hindrance, it has all of the necessary support for each shift to be complete and beneficial and not disrupt you in such a way that is damaging to your human form or your life or whatever. Just let it shift. Let it all shift, and it clicks into place very nicely. So that's that. That's the Gemini full moon for this year. We'll be back for another. When's the new moon? I think it's on the 12th. It is on the 12th. So yeah, I'll be back for the new moon on the 12th, and next week for yoga probably. That's all I got. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome full moon. Enjoy the shedding, the releasing, the whatevering, and the napping probably, or the overstimulation. Depends on how you're affected by Gemini energy. I've had very little coffee today. I'm a little all over the place, so I'm assuming it's not nap day. Au revoir.
Angtana veken sunana angte angtana japa kya